We have with us Sheetal Kakkad Mehra, India's leading executive presence coach and best-selling author who has trained numerous CEOs and star performers over the last 2 decades. In her latest book, she has shared her proven poise formula for success, tools to help you maximize your potential and fast track your career to the coveted role of a CEO. In this exclusive session, she will be sharing valuable insights on executive presence, which is the mysterious it factor in leadership. She will be talking about poise and its elements and how you can build executive presence in your career and maximize your potential. Hope you're excited to learn more about standing out. Join me in welcoming Sheetal Kakkad Mehra.
Thank you, Ankita. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. And I look forward to this session with the CRED members. Yes, I would like to start out by telling you about my book and also about the fact that how it is linked to the corporate careers. So I've authored a book on executive presence called The Poise Formula. We'll discuss it in detail through the day today. And but it starts with what is executive presence. A lot of research went into it, and people, of course, could identify it. People always knew. They said, "Yeah, Barack Obama has it. Sachin Tendulkar has it." They could think of multiple people who had it. Ratan Tata has it. Mr. Mahindra has it as well. So does Indra Nooyi. But what they couldn't identify was how to get it. What are the elements of executive presence? So I researched a lot, and I spoke to a lot of business leaders. I interviewed about 120 business leaders to demystify what is executive presence. Of course, it's wonderful that it's India's first proprietary formula on executive presence, and came up with the POISE formula. Now, what exactly is it? It is the physical presence. You may say we don't get influence, but we do get influence by the book. The human brain is extremely unique. We are constantly thin slicing. So when we look at something, we are constantly passing judgment. When a person walks in through the door, we look at them, and even before they've opened their mouth or even uttered a word, we have analyzed them on several non-verbal parameters, like what are they wearing, what is their body language, their economic strata, possibly their education background, even if they look successful. So multiple judgments are constantly being passed. Also, how you look has a huge psychological impact on how you behave, because it also influences your mind. So when you know you're looking good, and a lot of social scientists across the world have proven this, that when you know you're looking good, you also feel good. It's interesting, but you feel good about yourself. So physical presence matters. Of course, body language is a very strong non-verbal communication tool. Interestingly, we have been trained a lot on verbal communication tools, but we have never been trained on any kind of non-verbal communication tools. So what is body language? We are constantly communicating through our body. Research shows that 45% of communication is verbal, whereas 55% of communication is non-verbal, which is body language. So what is the body language of a winner? After researching, I realized that a very critical element is that they maintain direct eye contact. So when they speak to you, they are constantly looking at you, and you feel like you're the only person in this room. So their eyes are not looking over your shoulder or looking around to see who else they can see, but instead they maintain direct eye contact. Research shows in a face-to-face meeting, it is 50% of the time. However, in the world of Zoom and in the virtual world, it is about 70 to 80%, which could, of course, explain why all of us suffer from eye strain and fatigue. But when you maintain eye contact, it's very unique, but the brain automatically follows. So you listen better, you engage with people better, and you also tend to process information better. So one, they maintain direct eye contact. Also, an interesting fact about winners and their body language, which I noticed, was that they have an extremely strong, powerful posture. When they connect with people, they have their shoulders square, they are sitting as if they're ready to take on. Many times they even lean forward to show interest. So their body language is constantly communicating at another aspect, which a lot of people mention, was that leaders can read people. Now, it was very intriguing to understand what do you mean when you say a leader can read a person? And reading straight away translates into body language. That means they can actually look for non-verbal cues. They can figure out if the person means something, if the person is even lying. So a lot of deception analysis. Also, there's a concept called body language betrayal that winners are very good at spotting. So if you could see somebody and their gestures change, or the fact that they are not maintaining adequate eye contact, or they are maintaining excessive eye contact to show that they are very much more engaged and connected, that also leads to some kind of an analysis as to why it is deception. Also, interesting fact, if you look at the body language of a musician, or if you look at the body language of a winning team or a winning athlete, on mute, you just see the photograph, you will be interested to know that you can spot the winners. So clearly, there is a lot of non-verbal communication that happens. The sad part in a virtual meeting is that we don't have such good cameras where we can catch micro expressions that go past people's faces. So when somebody is talking, there's something that will just flash past in a fraction of a second. And that really helps people engage and understand. And interestingly, most of us have no control over those micro expressions. So good or bad, they just go flash past our face. And leaders are quick to pick up the cues on those micro expressions. So I think it's important to understand that the physical presence is extremely critical, is an extremely strong non-verbal communication tool, and most of us have not been trained on it. So yes, clothes create impact, and body language is an extremely powerful. The O in the formula is your online presence. Now, many people would say that, why do you need an online presence? I'm very good at my work. I'm technically good. I'm intellectually superior. I work very hard. Now, I don't believe in the world of online. The second biggest myth is that online is full of people putting, their moods and moments and their holiday pictures and sharing parts of their life, which should actually be in the personal domain. Now, interestingly, I do agree with you. Yes, there is a lot of online which could be in the garbage segment, but it helps you to understand that an online presence is important. And because when we do business, people sitting in different parts of the world, different parts of different countries, different parts of India, in fact. And the more we move to a virtual world, the more you will realize that body language as well as online presence matters, because we lack face-to-face interactions. So if you look at people who are sitting in another part of the world and you have a meeting with them, or if you decide to hire them, if you decide to do business with them, you will put their name into Google and see what shows up. In fact, research shows that the decision to hire, conduct business, interact with people, even schedule a meeting is heavily influenced by what people see of you online. So I have a suggestion. Put your name into Google and see what shows up. You will notice that there are two tools, which are two networking sites, which are on the professional side and have been established as professional networking sites. And two of them would be on the personal side. So that would be Facebook and Instagram. And on the professional side, it would be LinkedIn, surely. And then, of course, Twitter, in case you have something to add or to contribute. But in case you feel that there's nothing you would like to add or contribute, I have a suggestion. You must still curate your online presence. First of all, create opaque walls between your personal life and your professional life, which would mean that please go to the right-hand side of your Facebook account and your Instagram account, click on the privacy settings and close it, because you really only want your good friends and your childhood buddies and your family to actually see what's happening in your personal life. So you close the accounts to outsiders. Then if you post anything which you want to share with your family and friends, you at least have a select audience who is going to look at you, who knows you, who's going to be mature about what you have posted and sharing. On the other hand, there's LinkedIn and there's Twitter. I do believe that LinkedIn is a very powerful, strong tool for professional presence as well as for professional networking. Do have a sensible photograph of you, a professional photograph of you on LinkedIn. Do definitely update the information, your current role, job. Definitely have at least a few hundred contacts, because if somebody visits your LinkedIn profile and they see that you have possibly 43 contacts, it says nothing about your networking ability or how well networked you are with the external world. Of course, if you want to improve your visibility, you can contribute articles or put posts which are relevant. Sometimes you may even want to share a post of somebody that is iconic, somebody that you admire, something which is relevant to your industry or area of expertise. When it comes to Twitter, I feel it's a strong tool which should be used sensibly. So do understand that people that you follow and the posts that you put, of course, you have no control on the followers, but the people that you follow and the posts that you put are a direct reflection of your interests, hobbies, thoughts, processes. If you're not sure what to put, I have a suggestion. Just use it as a social listening tool. A lot of information, a lot of world leaders, thought leaders, current information, views on religion, politics are all there on that platform. So use it to understand, appreciate what's happening in and around you, and to understand and to curate your areas of interest. And it's a wonderful tool to learn. In fact, I personally use it to learn a lot of information on topics which are current, topics which are interesting, topics that I would never may possibly pick up a magazine on, like artificial intelligence or innovation in the last 6 months due to COVID. So lots of interesting topical current events information that you could use. So you definitely need a presence, and it reflects about your interests and your areas. And it's a great tool even to develop relationships and to engage in conversations one-on-one with people whose views you agree. I would not use a word like disagree, but who have different opinions from what you have. So it's a good tool to connect with people, to listen, to improve your visibility, and of course, to share your views with a much wider audience. Because the world has become flat, today you can talk to people sitting on different parts of this planet and engage with them in real-time conversation. So on that note, I'm going to just take a 2-minute break, and I know lots of you are logged in over here. So I would like to answer any questions that you have on what we have covered so far. You can unmute yourself and you can ask me the question. Ankita, if there's somebody has punched in something in the chat box, then of course I would love to hear that as well. You could read it out and ask me the question.
So far, we don't have any questions in the chat box. If anyone has a
super. Would anyone
question,
like to ask?
yeah, you can unmute and ask.
Yes, super. Is anybody in? Okay. So in case if you do have a question, you can unmute. We'll have another break in another 10 minutes. So you could unmute and ask me the question. The I in the POISE formula is your influencer skills. I think it is important because of the fact that leaders' job today is to inspire, motivate, and influence their teams. The management principles and styles have also changed. Earlier, leaders were much more dictatorial. It was a much more style of leadership where once a leader entered the room, everybody stood up and leaders were on a pedestal. Today, I think management styles have also changed. Organizations have become flatter. Leaders have become much more collaborative instead of being authoritative. Also, the role of a leader as we go to a virtual world is not so much that of a supervisor, but that of an influencer, a mentor, a coach, somebody who is actually an enabler, somebody who helps his team deliver to the best of their capability. So what is the new leadership role of an influencer? One is somebody who can engage with multiple people. I think their ability to put people at ease, their ability to put people at ease so that people can share their ideas has also become an important leadership skill for today's leaders. One aspect which we explored and have written in detail in the book is your positioning, your executive maturity, and your gravitas as a leader. It's important for the simple reason that leadership is all about actually knowing what to say, what not to say, how much to share, and when to share, and with whom to share what. So there are various factors in it, and what are the triggers that prevent people from displaying maturity? In a crisis like the current pandemic, it became increasingly important to actually display maturity because there was so much fake news, there was so much information floating around, there was so much of gossip and irrelevant facts which were floating around. So leaders today have had to engage much more. At times, they've even had to over communicate to sort out the fact from the fiction. And we would like to see the leaders in this role as that of somebody who is mature, who is able to convey confidence, who is able to sift out fact from fiction. Another aspect of leadership and influencing skills was that leaders are very good at conducting difficult conversations. One aspect of communication, which is ability to say no. In our culture, in all Asian cultures, we don't like to say no. However, if you know how to say no, it's an excellent tool for time management and stress management. Then you can focus on priorities. But in the Indian culture, we don't like to say the word no. However, we have multiple ways of saying no without saying no. So we say things like, I'll try, maybe, I'm not sure, let's see. Multiple ways of saying without actually saying no. So, how do you learn to say no to your bosses, to your peers, to your juniors, to your super boss? And that is very important because of the fact that it will help you to politely say no. My simple tip at this stage would be that while you should say no, and it's a very important skill for you to learn how to say no, but it is important to say a polite no because in our culture, we are not used to a direct no. Ours is an indirect style of communication. It's important to say a polite no. That's one. Secondly, as far as possible, try to say the no in person and not via email. That means could be on a Zoom call, could be even on a phone call, but definitely not on an email. People should be able to see you if and hear you when you say a no. And finally, say a negotiated no. We are not used to a direct no. That can never say, I'm sorry, I can't do this. It doesn't fit in with my schedule. But if you say a negotiated, like, yeah, I can work on this, but maybe then I will have to put the other project on hold for a week. Or you can say, do you mind if I do this next week if it's okay with you? Or, yeah, sure, I can help you. Not now, but maybe tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. So it's a negotiated answer and a negotiated response instead of a direct response. Important skill is taking and giving feedback. Somehow we are not good with this skill because we get emotional. As a culture, we are very emotional. At times, I feel we get too personal in our professional life and we get too professional in our personal life. So we are not good with giving and definitely not taking feedback. So, how to give feedback to people where you actually start out by praising them? Secondly, you give them negative feedback, which is completely data-based. And as far as possible, keep emotion out of it so that it's convincing. And how to end the conversation on a positive note so that the person has hope. So, multiple ways of giving feedback. Secondly, in our culture, we like to be praised in public, but we like to be criticized only in private. So, feedback which is negative should always be given in a closed door meeting. But feedback which is positive should be celebrated with the teams and possibly in a Zoom call with multiple people. So, how do you connect with people and how do you give feedback? Have difficult conversations, conversations around asking for a raise, conversation around what is your performance appraisal and why you feel it should be better. Even in the pandemic, people write a lot of letters to me, write a lot of emails to me, connect with me on LinkedIn and various platforms. And the one question that they've asked is that while we are completely burnt out and we are facing a lot of fatigue, but how do we ask for leave? Because it may not go down well. So how do you ask for leave in a virtual world is also very important, which should be data backed and should also highlight your good performance in the last 5 months and how you have met your targets and how it is justified that you require some leave now to attend to a lot of personal agenda items. Just because you are sitting at home does not mean that you're not working. So I think the virtual world also has led to a lot of changes. I do believe that earlier, if you went to office to 7 and people saw you working, they assumed you're working. Today, the paradigm of working and deliverables has also changed. Now it is what is the real work that you have done and what is the deliverable that you have achieved and what was your target or deadline. So professionalism has also changed, and it's the job of an influencer or a leader to communicate the changing style with his teams so that they also know what is expected of them. Humility continues to be an important leadership skill in this century. I think it's important to understand that what was earlier very arrogant, autocratic style of management, today we speak a lot about humility, about authenticity, about servant leadership, which has emerged. So all that entire spectrum of skills. Now, I personally think executive presence is not a trait. That means you're not born with it, but it is a skill. It is something that can be developed. It will help you present the best version of yourself. So while you can retain your authenticity, no problem at all. But what it will help you do is to put your best foot forward. I'm going to take a little 2-minute break. And if anybody has a question that they would like to ask, I would love to answer before we move on. And Ankita, if there's anything in the chat box, I would love to answer that.
Yeah, I have one question from Manish, who's
Super.
asking what one tip or key idea you can suggest to influence a client or third party.
I'll give you one tip, Manish, which everyone can use. And I think the word, it's a very bad word, and I'm going to share it with you. And the word is homework. This is one area I think we uniformly falter as humans and possibly as Indians, because you and I have been through the academic system. I firmly believe that we are allergic to the word homework because it brings back horrible memories of childhood. If you look back, Manish, the single-handed villain that killed all the fun in your childhood was a very bad word called homework. So we don't like to do homework. But if you ask me, the one tip that I would give you is do your homework. The corporate world calls it pre-meeting research, but it's the same word that has been recycled and it's called homework. Put the effort. If you want to really create impact, if you want to impress somebody, if you want to create, if you want to floor a client, could be internal, external. You want to get the promotion that you've always wanted with an internal client, do your homework. Go armed with data. I would say there's a simple formula called the 10x formula. If X is the number of minutes of the meeting that you're going to have with somebody you want to impress, 10x is the amount of homework that you need to do. So if you do 10 times the homework, you are definitely going to be impressing the person, because then you have everything that you've covered. Second tip that I would like to give you to really impress somebody is, which is a fallout of homework, is that you actually write down 2 intelligent questions that you're going to ask the person at the end of the meeting. Very frequently, decision makers are going to ask you a question. Do you have anything to ask me? And that is a trap. 9 out of 10 people are so relieved that the meeting is over that they say, no, thank you so much, I'll be in touch with you. However, at that stage, if you sit there and say, yes, there are a couple of things that I want you to answer if time permits, and 100% they're going to say no problem at all. At this stage, ask 2 intelligent, articulate questions. But if you think that you're so good that you can come up with the questions like this, I'm so sorry. You can't. Nobody can. Go armed with the questions. In fact, go with 3, because in your anxiety, there's a high chance that you'll forget one. So 2 at least you'll remember. At that stage, ask the 2 questions. And that is a very powerful impact, because that will force you to engage. That will force the person to actually answer the questions and respect you for your intelligence, your capability, as well as, of course, the meeting becomes longer, so you get more airtime. I hope that answers your question, Manish. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question?
We have a question from Debu.
Yes.
He's asking, how does one manage or turn around business with low skilled, non motivated teams who are resistant to change and where being assertive and data driven while giving feedback may still not be appreciated or embodied?
Yes, I agree with you. While data helps, ultimately it's the organization culture and how motivated you are. In fact, there's an excellent quote in the book from one of the leading private equity partners in India. And he had said that armies don't win wars, they only win it for their leaders. It's not the size of the army, but how motivated are they to actually give their life to a leader or a nation. So I do believe that you need to motivate your people. That is very important. And that is the critical skill a leader needs. In fact, it's not just today. Let me be honest with you. In the last 10,000 years, whatever the leadership role has demanded, whether it was kings, it was battles going on, it was colonization, whatever you could look, you can pick up any book on leadership in the last 10,000 years. And the single most important role of a leader has been to inspire and motivate his team. So get to know your team better, spend a lot of time engaging with them. And the good part is that they're all humans who have got challenges, who have got aspirations, who've got goals. So spend time with them, understand their challenges, and band them together as a team that works for you. So I think it's important for a leader to inspire, to motivate, and to understand each of his team members well and understand their challenges, their problems, even if they are not very high on skill, but we are all humans and we all have the same challenges. After a certain point, we are similar. So please sit with your team, motivate them, inspire them, make them want to work for you. It's not so much the money; it's the thought, the sentiment. If you see through history, I mean, you could have a father of a nation like Mahatma Gandhi who could actually band together a country and without a single bullet being fired, win freedom for a nation. And if you ask your grandparents or your great grandparents if they were around, they would say we did it for him. So he was inspiring, he was motivating. And in those days when technology was so low and what was a mode of communication? Today we have instant communication. That time people had to possibly read a newspaper, even radio was so poor, and yet he could motivate people. So I think roles of a leader is to motivate, to inspire, to sit with the teams and figure out what are their challenges and get them to work for you. Yes, I hope I've answered your question. Any other questions, Ankita? Is there one more and then we could move on?
Yeah, Uttam Kumar is asking how much Ivy League background matters.
At an entry level, yes, it does definitely get you a good entry because the fact that it is branded education and it is a filter which companies look at. But having said that, I think that is where it ends, if you ask me, because after that, multiple factors come into play. your hard work, your attitude, your emotional intelligence, and of course, your executive presence. So, how committed are you to the job? How much are you willing to give it? How much are you willing to work smart? So, yes, at an entry level, at the hiring level, it definitely makes a difference. It gains you a better entry because more branded companies go to campuses. But after that, I don't think it's a guarantee for success because I was reading somewhere and possibly I can't quote the name of the magazine, I'm not sure, but they surveyed the top 500. There was data on top 500 CEOs of the Fortune 500 companies, and possibly about 400 of them were not from any Ivy League college. So clearly, in fact, many of them were from very small colleges. Some had not even graduated and had very tough lives, and yet they made it. So I think it is not so important. It's not the deciding factor for success. At the entry level, yes, but after that, no. I think it's a level playing field. I hope that answers your question. Okay, so moving on. An important aspect is, of course, stage presence. The job of a leader is to communicate to an audience. Whether you are talking to 4 people in a conference room, 20 people on a Zoom call, or 500 people in a town hall, you're constantly communicating and communicating all the time. So I think that's very important. The public speaking skills is a critical skill for leadership, and all of you, whoever, whatever your role may be, whatever your job, industry, function, you could possibly be a business owner, but you're constantly communicating. So communication remains the #1 skill for success in this century. But public speaking is the ability to articulate a thought and to effectively convey it to your audience such that 80% of the people understand it in the first chance itself. I'm not very big on jargon. In fact, my book is also not very big on jargon, although it is India's first research on executive presence, which is a hardcore leadership skill. But I kept the language very simple. And the leaders who also gave me comments, I had requested them, and of course they were extremely obliging. I said this book is based on simplicity of language, not so much business jargon. People have to be able to understand what we are trying to communicate, and I strongly feel that is true in the world today. There are 216 nations trying to do business with each other with multiple languages. So it's important, while a good vocabulary is an asset, but when you speak to people, keep the language as simple and make sure that they understand what you're saying. Second aspect is your ability to communicate it. I think Indian education system does not polish the skill. Research shows that 93% of people, of adults, have ranked themselves as shy. Only 7% of people felt that they were extroverts. Of course, extroverted behavior is worshipped, but the fact remains that 93% of people have ranked themselves as shy on that entire spectrum of introverted behavior. Now, which means that in a class of 40 children, there are 2 children who are born extroverts. Schools have a low risk-taking ability. At the age of 5, they identify those children. Those are the children who say, Miss, can I get the chalk from the staff room? I'm sure you remember them. Or the children who will say, Miss, I'll wipe the blackboard. Or, Miss, I'll give out all the answer sheets to the students in the class. So they're up and about. And those are the children who get all the actings, dramatic, debates, elocution. It's the same people who walk away with all the parts. And this happens at the age of 5 and 6. And for the next 13 years, there are 38 children clapping and 2 on the stage. So I think this is a skill that should be polished at a school level. However, if you have reached the corporate world or you're running your own business, you're an entrepreneur, it's important to polish this skill. The ability to modulate your voice, the ability to engage people in the way that you speak, your pitch, your tone, and to make it interesting so that they want to listen to you, and your ability to tell a story such that people are engaged is important. Otherwise, I have a suggestion. Just send them an email or mail out the PPT to them and they can read it in their own time. Polish the skill. It comes with practice. I'm sure you would have read Malcolm Gladwell's book, which says that you have to do something for 10,000 hours to perfect it. Now, you may not take it that far, but I definitely feel that a few hundred hours of grabbing every opportunity that you get to speak in front of an audience. Today, technology has also made it easy. Videotape yourself, critique yourself. Till today, I do it, even although my job is that of a speaker, a trainer, a keynote speaker, but I still many times videotape myself and I say, oh my God, I should have done this so much better. Or I could have done at this point, this was not right. So critique yourself and help yourself change and improve. And it's not very difficult, but you need to focus on it, how you are going to engage with the audience. It's a skill which is important and very critical as you go up the ladder or become a more successful entrepreneur. Finally, the E is your engagement presence. how well can you connect with people? How well are you going to connect with people so that they remember you? What are your networking abilities, whether internally with your bosses, with your peers, with your colleagues, with your teams, or externally with your clients, vendors, you on a forum, you on a platform, you as a networking with your industry body or with any association that you're a member of, or even in the voluntary work, charity work. So, your ability to connect with people. Here we spoke a lot about small talk. I think this is one skill again that we can upgrade. We are very good when it comes to technical conversations, and that's a very common question that people write to me as well. That, I'm very good when it comes to technical conversations, which means that I can talk about my work, I can talk about the ongoing project very well, I can talk about what we are planning to do with in the next chap phase of the project, but I'm not good with icebreakers. And I think that's an important skill, the ability to conduct small talk with people. It works as an icebreaker. It also establishes the lowest common denominator. It also aligns everybody's thinking and helps funnel it to the big talk or the business talk that is to follow. So, the ability to conduct small talk. What to talk about and what not to talk about. Topics which are safe, of course, are sports because the world loves it. And if you are doing business with a particular country, I have a suggestion. There's a lot of information available on the internet for free. And if you can't find it, you can definitely write a mail to me. My office can help you out with information on a particular geography. So if you're doing business with a country and you want to upgrade your skills of how to communicate with your teams or your vendors or your clients in that part of the world, it's important. I do believe that knowledge is power. So, cross cultural, cross border communication, understanding cultures has become important for the global Indian. It's a wonderful time to be an Indian. Never in the history of the world have we interacted, communicated, merged companies, bought companies, sold companies, and all those who are working in the corporate world for large multinational companies will agree that today Indian professional and Indian companies and the India operation of a large company has arrived. So global companies are making investments in India. Indian companies have got a global footprint. Some of our largest groups have gone international, bought firms, employed a lot of people across the world. So cross-border communication is a very important skill for today's global Indian. I would request you to go armed with that knowledge. Understand your client, understand his communication style. Does he like direct communication? Are there certain topics that he would like to talk about? What are the sports that he likes talking about in his country? And trust me, some of the top 10 global countries countries which have gone global invest a lot more on cross cultural training than we Indians do. So your global counterpart also has figured out that what do Indians love to talk about. So he's going to talk to you a lot more about cricket, possibly about your family, which something that he wouldn't be doing with his countrymen. So understand what do people like to talk about. Sports always works. Uh, Current events works. Um, Performing arts, movies, books, travel. Food is a great connector. Across the world, people love to talk about food and local food. In my experience, I've noticed that two topics are inflammable. And honestly, I think they should be kept outside the business arena. One is religion, and the second one is politics. As far as possible, have an unbiased, neutral view, an academic discussion, no problem at all. But if you're going to take a stand, then I have a suggestion, take it with your friends or very close family, friends, family members, but not so much in the world of business because unless you know the person very well. Yes, if you have established a rapport with your client sitting in the US or Germany or Japan, and you have been doing business with them for over a year, they have shared their views on religion and politics with you, yes, then you can have an academic discussion. But in my opinion, I feel they're highly inflammable. And as far as possible, for the first few meetings, they should definitely be kept off limits. One more aspect which a lot of people wanted to understand was how to present yourself and how to perfect your elevator pitch. Elevator pitch is a much used word. You will notice, you'll find it in a lot of management books. You'll find it online also. What is your elevator pitch? Simple. Your full name, your area of expertise, your company name, and one or two sentences about yourself in the professional domain, which is going to help other person understand your work better and help them to conduct conversation. Simply put, don't leave it to chance. Write it down, learn it, and use it frequently to create a powerful impact. In fact, I always tell people that your elevator pitch is your script. It is what you need to learn and learn it by heart. You can make a few cosmetic changes based on the person who's across the table. But as far as possible, 80% of the content should be kept canned and practice it. It's like actors. They learn the dialogues before they report on the set. Because if they have to focus time on learning the dialogues or reading of a script, then they can't focus on emotions or voice. Similarly, in your world, focus on emotion and voice when you're conveying this elevator pitch. Can it, learn it, put it away, make it impactful, do 2, 3, 4 revisions, ask a couple of friends and your mentor and guide. And as far as possible, I think everybody needs a mentor. Mentoring is a very noble thing to do. And if there's somebody that you admire in your corporation, in your social circle, in your professional circle, be honest with them, walk up to them or send or make a phone call. In today's world, if you can't walk up and tell them that, you know, I've really admired the work that you do, I look up to you. If it's not too much to ask for, can you please be my mentor? I feel it works. I have requested a lot of people, men and women that I really admire, and they have given me wonderful advice. I don't think we can achieve success. It is not an individual sport. It is a team sport. So you need a team to back you. You can have multiple mentors. You don't need to confine yourself to one, but be honest, be transparent, make a request, and life is about give and take. A lot of networking is like banking. First, you need to make a deposit before you make a withdrawal. So see what you can do to help other people achieve their goals. They may have a requirement which is simple. They may need something that you can do without much effort. So volunteer your services and make sure that you get yourself a mentor. Connect with them. And if you are at a level in the organization or at an age and stage in your career, and I think all of us are at that age and stage, please take on a younger person as your mentee. Help them with your experiences. So that way the circle of goodness gets completed. So every time you ask somebody to be your mentor, take on somebody whom you can mentor and who could benefit from your experiences and share a lot with you. So I think mentoring is something that all leaders have, and a coach or a guide, if you can't afford, at least have a few informal mentors who can help you with a lot of agendas that you have. Finally, networking is a very important skill. In all my years of coaching senior leaders, I have realized that they have extremely well networked. They know people from all walks of life. And I do believe that there's magic in everyone. So don't get critical about networking and whom you should network with. I network a lot. I meet a lot of people. I connect. I have teachers. I have hairdressers. I have electricians. I have architects. I have plumbers. I have corporate professionals. I have CEOs. I have lawyers. So there are multiple people that you need to know in your network. And I think it's important to engage with people. And when you engage with people, remember one thing: as far as possible, keep the experience positive. Greet people cheerfully. Bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm in your conversations. I've noticed one thing, that leaders have a lot of energy and they exude a lot of enthusiasm when they talk to people. And that is an important skill for success, because you have the stamina and the desire and the passion to succeed. So whenever you engage with people, please put in a lot of energy into that engagement. That means you greet people cheerfully, show a lot of motivating enthusiasm. And the good thing with the enthusiasm is that it's infectious. When you walk into a room or you walk into a Zoom meeting and you are enthusiastic, you'll notice one thing: suddenly everybody feels a lot more uplifted and cheerful. So it is an important skill, and it is something that you definitely need to focus on. Finally, how to communicate and influence and exude executive presence in today's virtual world. There are a lot of challenges, I agree. One is that we don't have the infrastructure to operate in a virtual world, so our homes are not geared up. Secondly, we live in smaller homes because real estate cost in metros in India especially is extremely expensive. So we have a lot of family members, we live multi-generational. So yes, we have an infrastructure problem. Second, of course, is the fact that our culture is a very verbose culture. We like to connect with people, we like to talk. Even I personally am missing going to office for the simple reason that, you would walk into office, you would speak to two people, you would walk to the coffee machine and fix yourself a coffee, you'll meet three people there, then you'll walk back to your desk and chat with somebody on the way, then you go to the washroom and meet people on the way, in the washroom, on the way back, then you go for lunch and you meet people. So we have an engaging work life where we connect with a lot of people and we build a lot of relationships with people which go beyond the work. So you know people's problems, challenges, if somebody has a personal problem, you also know if they're facing a crisis and you could be their support. All that, of course, has slowly been taken away because of the virtual world. Who knows, we may never go back to full day working and full-time working from office. There may emerge even a hybrid model where some of us would work some days and the rest of us would be hot desking. So I have no idea what the future holds. But yes, definitely, a lot of people are feeling that remote is equal to aloof. So I think that we need to engage with people. I think it's important in today's virtual world to, one, activate your video when you talk to people. Be ready to take on conversations because we want to see your face, we want to see your expression. As far as possible, if you want to make a connect with people, you want to create an impact, it is important that you activate the video and see the person across, could be 10,000 kilometers away. But it's important to put a face to a name. It is important to put a name to a voice. So as far as possible, be ready and activate the video. That's important. Secondly, try to conduct some conversation before you launch into a business dialogue. That's important because people are also feeling the disconnect. So ask them how was their day, ask them what was a new thing that they did during the week, how is their area coping with the current COVID crisis, could be also something about the economy, something that you about. So do not get transactional. Instead, spend a couple of minutes at the start and the end of a conversation discussing something which is small talk, which is outside of the area of work. It works as an icebreaker. It also is a stress buster because earlier we also had a lot of buffer between meetings. We would have a 3 to 4 meeting, and then for 10 minutes we'll walk around the office, help ourselves to a cup of tea, conduct some different conversation, come back, sit on your desk and send out a report. Today, the whole life has become 9:30, 10, 10:30, 11. So everybody is working in a half an hour slot and it's a Zoom call. So I think it's important to engage in discussions. Also, think of some social conversations and social engagements that you could possibly have with your team members or with your bosses or with your peers. So you could possibly have a 5 o'clock coffee with somebody. You could even, a team that I was speaking to, a large corporation, they said that, they have a pizza party on Friday, which means that at 6 o'clock, everybody gets a pizza, a small personal pizza from an international chain to their homes. And then everybody has a triangle in their hand and they have a pizza party. You could have a Friday team drinks with your people. You could also have like a bring a family member and have a 10-minute chat with that family member. So it's a good news is that now we are also seeing the personal life, the person behind the designation. So if you look at it positively, it has its benefits as well. We are getting to see the real person behind the designation or the person whom we saw in the office. So if you look at it positively, yes, there are benefits to it as well. One more aspect is that I think bosses also have to understand that deliverables have changed. Micromanaging is passé. So you can't be calling up people every half an hour and asking if they've done the task. It has become flexi. So you set tight schedules, you set tight targets, deadlines. Then you become loose with the way people do that work. So if somebody wants to do it at 5 a.m. or they want to do it at 11:30 at night, no problem at all. And then you become tight when it comes to the deadline of delivering the project. But I think people need to have the flexibility. And people who are working in teams, it's very important that you take ownership for your work. Has become hardcore deliverable. So you do it in your own time, but do definitely inculcate self-discipline and do understand that there is a deliverable, and you need to justify that, the fact that you are a part of a team and on delivering a certain agenda. So I think trust factors have to change, ownership has to change, accountability has to change, and how we measure performance and productivity also has to. So yes, we are living in a very unique time. So on that note, I have a few minutes. And when Ankita tells me it's enough, then of course we'll have to, you can stay in touch with me. Before we log off, I would like to say that, I would love to answer your questions. I've trained more than 60,000 people across Asia in the last so many years of doing this. And I like to stay in touch with people. I receive over 200 questions a month, which I personally answer them myself. I don't promise a 24-hour response, but you can send me a question on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or go to my website and send me a direct question. So learning is not going to end when we end this session, but I would love to help you achieve your professional goals. So do stay in touch, and I would love to take questions from you. So thank you.
Hi, Sheetal. Good evening.
Good evening. Good to connect with you.
Same here. Thank you. Thank you for this session, first of all. And I'm actually intrigued by the painting that you have in the background. Maybe later you can
Yes,
let me
you
know
could
what it
see
is.
it. It's a Belgavi.
Oh, okay. Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So my question was, do you think across cultures and across different, obviously, because you said we are now, kind of global Indians, we work with multiple cultures. Do you think the understanding of executive presence is different across different cultures? And do you think for them the priority of these skills is different in cultures in Asia and in the Americas, in the European region?
Yes,
Yeah.
I do believe that there will be a 20-25% difference because of the fact that culture is very deep. See, culture is 10,000 years old. Globalization is a very powerful, strong tool, but it's only 20 years old. So when you take something which is 10,000 years old and something which is 20 years old and slap it together, there's bound to be confusion. So there will be a variation. I agree completely. Some cultures are more formal, like in the Japanese culture. They are extremely formally dressed. Their style of communication is very formal. They are still much more hierarchical than an American culture. On the other hand, Americans could be much more casual. But then Americans on the Wall Street in New York would be much more formal than Americans in the Silicon Valley. So it also becomes geographical. So I have a suggestion. There is no one size fit all. But do understand your client, do understand whom you're connecting with, and you have to go armed with that knowledge, because when you keep it at the back of your mind, that information is going to help you build long lasting and better relationships. Yes,
Got it. Thank you.
does that answer your question? Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you. There's something in the chat box that Ankita, you can ask me in case, till we wait for someone else to ask a question.
Yeah,
That kind of
Sunil is asking a question.
Yes, yes, yes.
good evening. That kind
Good
of
evening.
diversity that we see here in India as well. If you see geographically, if you are somebody
Yes.
from north is talking to south person, so
Perfect.
even
Yeah, there's too
in
much
spite of having
diversity.
a lot of experience, people exhibit and
Of course, I'm sure some of you who have teams which are east, west, north, south, you will, if you sit down and discuss how you sell to a customer in east is very different from how you sell to a customer in south or north or west. So yes, we are extremely diverse as a culture, and yes, we are a United States of India. Yeah, there is something in the chat box.
Yeah.
Ankita.
Manish has asked, how do you ask for mentorship from someone? I think you already answered that question,
Yes.
but if you'd like to add, I'll wait.
Be direct, be honest, be transparent, and tell them that, I've really admired you and I would like to have you as a mentor. The fear of rejection is very high. That's the reason why people don't ask. But let me be honest with you. What is the worst they can do? They'll say no. That's okay. You say, I can appreciate that. Thank you so much. And, I've really admired you. So don't live in the fear of no. I think this fear of rejection is a very deep rooted fear that we have. And that actually prevents us from in our personal and professional life. I'm not going into personal at all, but I would say in professional life as well. People are very scared of no and rejection, and they take it very personally. Be a little thick skinned. Don't take it personally. Ask, what is the worst that can happen? They'll say no. Okay, thank you. I really still admire you. And your dialogue, at least now they know that you admire them. So it is a bit of an ego massage for them as well. Yes, next question. There's
How do
something in the chat
we
box.
how do we
Yeah.
motivate women to take leadership position? There is a lot of potential in our country, but that does not translate into numbers. Where should it begin? Is it school, home, college, or corporate world?
Everywhere. Everywhere. Gender bias is real. It should begin in homes and schools. It's a thought process. Companies should support it. Multiple factors. In fact, I have an NGO where we work towards women engineers, women in tech, women in STEM, and we are working for the last 13 years. It's called Catalyst with a K, Catalyst Winds of Change, and we are looking for mentors in case some of you would like to mentor a young engineering student. And yes, we are working towards it. I think everybody needs to do their bit. All of us are in it together. It is half the population of the world, and yet, but we are taking steps, all of us, and I think the world is moving towards it slowly but surely. But yes, we can hasten the process. Each of you in this room.
Ankur is asking any tips for influencing CXO level stakeholders?
Superb question. One, go prepared and do your homework. Two, decision makers, CEOs, CXOs always speak in bullet points. Their style of communication is extremely clear and crisp. So when you talk to them, please do not tell them something in an essay format. Instead, tell them what you want to tell them in a clear, crisp way. Also, CXOs are very good with micro as well as macro. So they have a 30,000-foot perspective, but they can also zoom in on 4 feet. So if you're going to present slides or information or data to them, be ready for them to tell you that, can you please go back to the last slide and tell me what was that 4.3% and can you explain it to me? So please understand and appreciate that you should surely know your matter well, because they can call your bluff and they can find out if you're out of your depth. They are very good with understanding what is the crux of the problem. Their clarity of thought is amazing. They are very good with connecting dots. So if there is some way that you know them through some connection, definitely use it. So if you walk up to them and say, something, you grew up in Jamshedpur and so did I, they're not going to forget you. Or if you say, something, you went to IIT Kanpur and so did I, of course you are many years senior to me. Or you grew up in Cochin and so did I. So if you can make a connect, you went to the same school, you went to the same college, do your research and try to connect the dots, they will definitely remember you. And finally, they have a lot of respect for people who ask them questions that they can speak about, or which challenge their conversation, or force them to discuss things outside the box. So as I said earlier, definitely go armed with 2 questions, and they are going to respect you and remember you. I hope that answers your question. It's all in the book, though. I've dedicated about 6 pages to communicating with CXOs and decision makers. But yes, these are the few tips in short. Yes, any other questions in the chat box?
How to overcome the fear of having a low visible persona when you communicate with boss's boss or higher management?
You have to rehearse what you're going to say. Don't leave it to chance. Please understand what you're trying to communicate, because you are one of the many people that they meet in their daily life. So if you want to connect with a super boss, it's important to script and find some aspect of conversation that you want to focus on. And as far as possible, keep it positive so that you're creating a good, strong, powerful impact. Rehearse the speech, figure out what you're going to say to them, what questions you're going to ask them, because they come to your office in a very structured way. They are not walking around the corridors. And if you have something, and many times I tell people, keep it ready. Like if there are 5 people that you want to create impact internally and there are some super bosses, sitting at your office desk, ask yourself, if I bump into them, what would I tell them? You cannot have a fangirl moment where you just look at them and say, you know, I really admire you. You're so good. Or I really appreciate what you've done. No, no, no. That's not what it is. They have heard that multiple times. But what are you going to tell them that is going to engage them? And that you are the best judge of. But I have a suggestion. Keep it ready for top 5 people that you would definitely like to meet. And if you bumped into them in an elevator, what would you ask them in that 60-second ride? That they can at least remember you from all the faces and all the people who have told them the same thing, that you're very good, or I really admire you, or whatever, you know. Or how was your journey? That's a question that they are tired of answering. Yes, any questions?
I think Amiruddin has raised his hand.
Yes. Would you like to speak and activate the? Yeah, super.
Yeah. So Sheetal, thank you so much for a wonderful webinar. Got to learn quite a lot of things.
Thank you.
So my question is with the POISE formula, like physical presence, communication, speech. This is something from outside in, like your physical presence, your communication, your engagement. These are the external things. So it's some sort of an outside in building of a leader. I'm just wondering if you had to take a stab at inside out, like you be a leader inside, and these traits you are automatically going to display. So what would be these core values of a leader that that you would ask everyone to follow, or any books, any references that you can give?
I think there are 2
things
which are very important inside out. One is that you have to know your triggers. It's very important because most of us are not aware of what really triggers us. So if you have an understanding, which is a very critical factor, and it is covered in multiple books called Spiritual Quotient or SQ, I think that's very important. That is a critical skill. Second, of course, in today's world is humility. I think that's very important because the world has changed. There are multiple expectations. You're interacting with people, but leaders are now expected to be humble, and people who are not on a platform or a podium, but people who are one of us, who can help us do a better job. So that is very important to understand what are the factors and how to display humility. The third, I think, is authenticity. You have to be yourself. You cannot be somebody fake or pretentious. That will, people can see through that. So you have to, first of all, be yourself. Your core values, your thought process, your ethics, those if you bring to the front, instead of trying to be somebody else. Don't be somebody else. Just be the best version of yourself. That's very important. So yeah, know your triggers, be humble, and be yourself. That's very important because people can figure out when you are lying.
Thanks. This is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm just going to pause, Sheetal,
yes.
here if anyone wants to unmute and ask.
I can spend more time, but how are we doing on the time as an event?
We're 10 minutes past. We'll close with one last question. Couple of people have raised hand. I just suggest that you unmute yourself. Whoever wants to ask a question can just unmute and ask.
So,
yes.
Hi Sheetal, this is Devi here.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, of course I can hear you.
Yeah. So one question that I had in terms of executive presence is the vulnerability aspect. I have read in a lot of places that all the great leaders are vulnerable. But is there a way that you start being vulnerable, or is there a way to know how vulnerable you are currently and improve upon the vulnerability? I mean, I'm not sure how to measure the vulnerability of oneself and how you improve on that. Is there any?
Okay, I'll be honest. There's no diagnostic tool to measure it. Of course, if you design it, you'll be a billionaire. So it's worth exploring if you're very passionate about understanding vulnerability. But I think, I'll be honest with you. the kind of vulnerability that I've seen in the last 6 months of this virtual world that we lived in, I had never actually seen it in the last so many years. I think I've really seen the real side of people, their challenges, their problems. And I think it's a good step that people have taken, which is to bring their real self to their workplaces. So I think we have actually done well on that quotient in a very sad circumstances called a pandemic. But yes, we've really actually done well on that quotient, which is we've seen the vulnerable side of people. And as I said earlier, it's important to show your vulnerabilities, because that style of leadership, where leaders had no chinks, leaders had no negatives. You know what vulnerability does is that it also helps the other person feel good about the fact that there are areas of improvement with you as well. And it's a human side to show that all of us have negatives, positives, gaps that we can work with, and we are not perfect. So I think it's a great way for people to understand that it's important as a leader to show it. And I'm very happy in the last 6 months, I've seen certain, the kind of vulnerability I've seen in all my interactions with people has been phenomenal. I don't know if you would agree.
Yeah, I would agree definitely. But the aspect of vulnerability, again, has a constraint of judgment. So
Yeah.
I don't know whether that is directly related, but when people want to be vulnerable, there is an aspect that people are always judgmental. They decide
Yeah.
based on few of your interactions, and that might
Yeah.
be difficult to change going on. So that is something that always restricted me to be vulnerable
Yeah, I
with the
can understand.
yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's like peeling the layers of an onion. As you get to know people better, you start seeing the core. So do not be vulnerable initially, but as you get to build the relationship, it is a critical element for actually building relationships in the workplace to show who is the real you. So don't feel
Got it.
guilty, and it is important.
Got it.
Yes. So Ankita, how are you doing on the time?
Just before just we close, I mean,
Yeah.
taking it further, this concept of vulnerability. I mean, there is one thing actually,
Yes.
as we look holistically on executive presence, as a quick
Yes.
step, how to
Yeah.
connect to a person, of course, senior, and to influence him when already a person is already having a low bandwidth in terms of presence and acceptance in a in an existing setup.
That means, how do you connect with him initially, or how do you communicate with him?
Uh, exactly. See, let us say there have been instances, okay,
Yeah.
where already some kind of margin was already eroded.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you have to work
So,
backwards.
yeah,
That
yeah,
means you
work
have to
back.
build
Yeah.
the brand. See, it's important that you understand if something has been eroded, then you need to work extra hard to build it. And secondly, to build something is a slow process. To erode is a very momentous process. That means in a few moments you can erode a lot of, or you can break a lot of relationships. But to rebuild that trust and to rebuild that comfort level and factor is a slow process. So I would suggest, one, be persistent and be patient. Don't expect any phenomenal things or overnight changes, because a lot of it has been eroded. And to win back that faith and trust, you will have to display it, and display it patiently, and display it multiple times. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to win it back. So patience and persistence. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheetal, with that, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the
Thank
entire
you.
CRED team and all the participants here who attended the session. It was a very, very insightful session, and you've
Thank
answered all the
you.
questions very patiently. Thank you so much for that. As a last note, someone's asked names of the books by you. One is obviously Executive Presence, but I'd like you to answer that and leave us with references and reading material that, or by you, that we can read post this session.
Thank you. Thank you. In 2012, I authored a business bestseller called Business Etiquette, a guide for the Indian professional. I felt that all books on that subject were written by foreign authors, but a population of 1.3, possibly 1.4 billion Indians needed to have a book which understood Indians better. So I would say that is an ideal book that is going to take you from the classroom to the cubicle. And it's a must read for everybody who would like to do that transition. And the second book that I've authored is now, which is called Executive Presence, The Poise Formula for Leadership. This is actually going to take you from the cubicle to the corner office. So those are the two books. Both of them are available on Amazon. The first book did very well, got translated into multiple regional languages. All the Ivy League colleges of the across the world, as well as the Oxfords and the Cambridges, have the book in their library. And this book has been released just 6 weeks ago and has done very well. And based on pre-order, in fact, Amazon had even given it a bestseller tag. So yes, and if you have any questions, any review that you would like to share, do connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I would definitely like to hear from you. So some of you whose questions were left unanswered, or you think of something post the session, do feel free to connect. And you've been a wonderful audience, extremely interactive. Thank you so much, and enjoy your weekend. Thank you.